Immigration in Australia has been relatively stable over the last decade, but then the pandemic came and brought a halt to that. But since then, it's been full steam ahead. That backlog of people wishing to come to Australia, well, their dreams came true, in spades. There was record overseas migration last year. If you look at the proportion of residents born overseas, it's been steadily, rapidly, increasing since the 1950s to its current level of over 30%. We are a nation of immigrants. Now, of course, immigration is sometimes used as a scapegoat for other political and societal issues, but I think this time round it's really starting to hurt. Think about it mathematically. If you keep letting more and more people in, but don't build enough housing, schools, hospitals, not to mention other infrastructure like water and electricity, well, that's going to end in disaster. There's really only two things that can be done. We either build more infrastructure to keep up with the ever-increasing population, which is something we simply haven't been able to do, and increasingly looks like we can't do, or we cut immigration. Isn't that the easiest option? I mean, it's our country after all. It's not like there's an external force making us accept hundreds of thousands of new people every year. It's ultimately a choice. We either continue along this path of continual housing crises, or we give ourselves a breather so we have a chance to fix it. This is not just me rambling. I haven't just been released from the asylum screaming that immigration is evil. Other people agree with me. Take, for instance, the Premier of Queensland, Stephen Miles. You might not like him, but he sees the writing on the wall. There's too many people. He broke ranks a couple of days ago, as reported by the ABC. Queensland Premier Stephen Miles calls for a reduction of overseas migration. The Queensland government says the state's population increased by 144,000 people, 2.7%, in the year to September, which was the highest growth on record in absolute terms. Mr Miles said the population was climbing faster than homes could be built and urged the federal Labor government to consider reducing overseas migration levels. The Queensland Treasurer, Cameron Dick, said migration levels are just becoming too difficult for the state to manage, telling the ABC that he wants to see international migration levels halved. Whatever the federal government think they're doing is just not sustainable. Well, Albanese's government have reacted. Government to cap international student numbers. In a move to cut migration, the Albanese government will limit the influx of international students by capping the number of new students. They've basically tightened English language requirements and plan to create a genuine student test to crack down on those looking to come to Australia primarily to work rather than study. But of course, students are mostly temporary visa holders, are they not? So what are the Albanese government going to do regarding the reduction of permanent migration? Well, this is the Department of Home Affairs, Immigration and Citizenship website. On 14th of May 2024, the Australian government announced that the planning levels for the 2024-25 permanent migration program will be set at 185,000 places. Okay, how much was it before? Scrolling down, there's a table. I'll just paste the headings in for you. So last year, the planning levels were 190,000 people per year, made up of about 70% skilled and 30% family visas. This year, it's been reduced to 185,000. That's a yearly reduction of 5,000 people. It's almost laughable, is it not? How is a reduction of 5,000 people going to fix anything? That's only a reduction of about 2.6%. Remembering the State Labor Treasurer Cameron Dick was calling for migration levels to be halved. Not even close. Actually, the top national news on the ABC this morning was about federal opposition leader Peter Dutton. Dutton calls to slash permanent migration and international student numbers. Peter Dutton has announced that if elected, he will reduce annual permanent migration from 185,000 to 140,000. It's better, I suppose. I don't know if it's enough. But as I said, we need to give ourselves a breather to catch up with housing construction and so on. Pauline Hanson's One Nation have openly stated that Big Australia is a big mistake. They have a zero net migration policy, which doesn't mean zero immigration. Of course, every year, hundreds of thousands of people leave Australia for whatever reason, as shown in dark blue down the bottom. And the difference between this and the inbound migration is the net overseas migration, shown in orange, which is what One Nation wished to get to zero, at least for a period. So their goal, I suppose, is to replace the people leaving Australia with skilled migrants. This is Australia's projected population according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, with the assumption of 275,000 people per year net overseas migration for the high series, which would result in a population of over 45 million by 2070, 225,000 people per year for the medium series, and 175,000 people per year for the low series, with zero net overseas migration shown down the bottom in red. In the name of fairness, I'd like to show you the Australian Greens immigration policy. Of course, there's a picture of a miserable-looking boy behind barbed wire. Their policy is quite long and wordy and consists of dozens of principles and aims, of course invoking the climate crisis. I can't see any reference to exact numbers, but I suppose to be fair to them, they're not in government. Although here's what Greens leader Adam Bandt had to say recently. Migration hasn't caused Labor's housing crisis. It's Labor backing unlimited rent rises, unlimited interest rate rises, and not building enough public and affordable housing. That's what's got us into the housing crisis that we're in. But now Labor has joined the Liberals in blaming migration for the housing crisis. Stop trying to out-tough Peter Dutton, because there's nothing he won't do. Earlier today, Mr. Bandt tweeted, Dutton's vision for the country: blame migrants, refugees and international students. That's it. More hate. More dog whistling. Sadly, instead of drawing a line in the sand, Labor's joining in a race to the bottom with their Trump-like migration bill. The Liberals are resorting to the only trick they know, leaning on racism as a distraction for their refusal to address the greed of the big banks, supermarkets and property investors fueling the housing and cost of living crisis. Dutton's scheme won't get Australia back on track. It is a backtrack to the White Australia policy. The Greens will take on Dutton's hateful agenda and the big corporations responsible for the pain you're in. I guess this means the Greens are against reducing immigration. I like this reply. How can you claim to be an environmentalist when you support infinite migration? It's a good question. Obviously, environmentalism and mass migration just don't mix. So I'd say there's a bit of cognitive dissonance going on in the Greens party. Anyway, I think Albanese has realised that immigration has become a problem, not just for Australia, but also for his political future.